We spend a staggering amount of time these days talking about polarization. I mean, you turn on the news, you scroll through social media, and the feeling is just that society is fracturing because we're all too different.
hmm Different values, different truths.
Exactly. It feels chaotic, unmanageable. But what if the solution to that chaos wasn't, political or cultural? What if it was chemistry?
And we're not talking about chemistry in a metaphorical sense, like, oh, they have good chemistry. No, we're talking about literal social engineering
Yeah.
based on the physics of the periodic table.
That is the terrifying premise we are unpacking today. We're looking at a short story from 1964 called The Stanley Farm by the Soviet author and cyberneticist Anatoly Dneprov.
Yeah, and this isn't just a simple story about cloning. It reads more like a warning shot from the Cold War about the real cost of absolute order.
It really does. And Dneprov is such a fascinating figure. He wasn't just a writer, he was a physicist. So he approached his stories almost like a lab experiment.
Right, and in this story, he's running a simulation on one very specific, and I'd say very dangerous, question.
Yeah.
If you want a stable society, do you need to standardize human beings?
Uh-huh.
The same way a metallurgist standardizes a steel beam.
It's the thought experiment on determinism, the social atom, and the absolute horror of getting exactly what you wish for. So let's step into the lab. But the lab in this story, well, it's not some sterile white room. It's a park bench on a damp, gloomy autumn day.
The atmosphere is so crucial here. You've got the narrator just sitting on this bench, and there's jazz music drifting out from a club nearby called Sperry Dancing.
Right.
And sitting next to him is just this wreck of a human being.
Yeah.
An old man weeping, checking his watch over and over again, waiting for someone.
Yeah.
Dneprov describes his face as having the profile of an inverted crescent moon.
That's such a striking image, just someone whose face is literally curved by gravity and sadness. And the narrator, at first he just assumes the guy is senile or maybe drunk. But then the old man, who we find out is named Dick, he starts talking. And he doesn't sound drunk. He sounds like a professor of doom.
He really does. He lays out this theory that immediately hooks you. He calls it the problem of the heap.
And this is the core idea of the story, right?
Yeah, and it's surprisingly modern. Dick argues that humanity is unstable because we are, in his words, a heap of foreigners. We think we're communicating, but we aren't.
He uses language to prove it.
Exactly. He says if 10 people say the word tree, they are effectively speaking 10 different languages.
Because my mental image of a tree is, I don't know, a big oak. Yours might be a pine tree. Someone else's is a palm tree. The word is the same, but the internal data is completely different.
Precisely. And because that data is different, true communication is impossible. Dick argues that this semantic noise is the friction that causes wars, divorce, social collapse, all of it.
So he pivots to physics.
Yeah, he asks the narrator, why is a gold bar stable? Why is an iron girder strong?
Because every single atom of iron is identical to every other atom of iron.
In a crystal lattice, there's no misunderstanding between atoms. They fit together perfectly because they're standardized. They react the same way to heat, to pressure, to stress. So, Dick's hypothesis is pretty simple. If you want a society as strong as iron, you can't have unique individuals. You need standardized people.
Okay, and this is usually the part of the conversation where you nod politely and just edge away from the guy on the bench.
Right.
The narrator basically laughs it off. He says you can't apply the laws of physics to sociology. But Dick isn't just theorizing.
No. He reveals that years ago, he was a student of a biochemist, a Professor Forkman, and they cracked the code. They figured out how to grow a complete adult organism from a single somatic cell.
And remember, this is 1964. Dneprov is basically predicting cloning decades before Dolly the sheep.
But the application here is so different. They aren't trying to, extend life or cure diseases. They are trying to manufacture a social crystal. They want to create human atoms that are totally interchangeable.
And here is where the story shifts from, hard sci-fi to this really dark psychological thriller. The flaw in the experiment, and there is always a flaw, wasn't the technology. It was ego.
It's the ultimate narcissism. Dick and his wife, Archie, they decide they need to create this new society. So they look at their friends, their neighbors, everyone around them, and they just decide everyone else is too flawed.
They find moral defects, physical defects, intellectual shortcomings.
I mean, it's a whole thing. And they conclude that the only genetic material worthy of becoming the standard for all of humanity is their own.
Of course. So they clone themselves. They make 2 clones of Dick, 2 clones of Archie. But, and this is the part that really digs into the whole nature versus nurture debate, Dick realizes that genetics just aren't enough.
Right. If you want a truly standard person, they have to have the exact same inputs to get the exact same outputs. You can't just copy the hardware, you have to copy the software installation too.
And this is where the Stanley farm comes in. It's this controlled environment. They move back to the actual farm where the original Dick and Archie grew up. They dress the clones, who are, I mean, they're basically their children, in these numbered jerseys.
And they force them to relive the original's childhoods, day by day, second by second.
It's just brutal. It's not parenting, it's programming. They're literally staging their own lives for an audience of 4.
It's deterministic scripting. So if the original Dick climbed a specific poplar tree when he was 10, the clones are forced to climb that same tree at age 10.
If the original Archie dropped a bucket in the well, the clones have to drop the bucket. They're not allowed a single unique experience.
And the terrifying part is, it works.
It works perfectly. The old man describes watching them like he's looking into a time machine. He sees his own life just playing out on a 30-year delay.
The clones even fall in love with each other, just like the parents did. They meet in the same spots in the woods, they say the same lines.
Which brings up a really heavy philosophical point that Dneprov is obviously playing with. I mean, if the clones fall in love because they were placed in the same woods at the same time with the same genes, is it actually love?
Or is it just a chemical reaction? The story basically suggests that what we call romance might just be an inevitable collision of variables.
It just strips all the magic right out of it. So the narrator is listening to all this, probably horrified, and he asks the obvious question. Okay, so where is your wife? Where is the original Archie?
And the old man just says very plainly, she hanged herself.
Wow.
Yeah, this is the pivot. The whole experiment was designed to replicate a perfect society, but because they used themselves as the templates, they didn't just replicate their biology. They replicated their sins.
Okay, let's unpack that, because
Yeah.
it is the absolute crux of the tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out the original Dick wasn't a great guy. Decades earlier, he cheated on Archie with the daughters of a neighbor, a man named Mr. Solp. He'd actually planned to leave Archie for one of them.
And he was cruel about it. He called Archie a cold little fool behind her back.
So the original Archie, she either suppressed this trauma, or maybe she never knew the full extent of his disdain for her. But now they're running the simulation again.
And the young clone Dicks start visiting the neighboring farm, where, by some coincidence, there are new Solp daughters available.
History repeats itself. Literally. The original Archie walks in on the clones, and she hears the young Dick saying the exact same cruel things to the neighbor girls that her husband had said 30 years ago.
It just shatters her reality. She realizes her husband's betrayal wasn't, a one-time mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was a feature of his personality. It was a mathematical inevitability.
If you run the Dick program 100 times, he cheats 100 times.
The experiment forced the truth into the light. And so she goes to a specific oak tree by the creek and hangs herself.
And here is the absolute horror of the social atom idea. The old man, sitting on that park bench, he knows the clones are happy right now. They're young, they're in love, they're dancing at the club.
But he also knows, with scientific certainty, that the young female clones will eventually find out about the betrayal.
Huh.
And he knows they will also hang themselves on that same oak tree.
And he doesn't try to stop it. He's sitting right there.
He feels he can't. In his mind, he hasn't just raised children, he's created a law of physics. Asking the clones not to commit suicide would be like asking an apple not to fall from a tree.
He calls it original sin, but he views it as just a variable in an equation. He's just resigned to it. He views his own guilt as another data point.
But the equation doesn't end with suicide.
No. The narrator pushes him. What happens next in the script? Because if the clones are repeating everything, surely the suicide isn't the end of the timeline.
And it turns out, to fund his early experiments, the original Dick committed insurance fraud. He blew up an oil tanker.
Yeah.
And he robbed a pharmacy.
So, logically, the clones are going to blow up a tanker. They are going to rob a pharmacy.
And why do they need to rob a pharmacy?
For the chemicals.
Yeah.
To make more clones.
Right. It's an exponential catastrophe.
Yeah.
You start with 2 Dicks, they clone themselves to make 4, then 16, then 256. The narrator suddenly has this vision of the future that is just apocalyptic.
He sees a forest of oak trees planted for the sole purpose of accommodating mass suicides.
And fleets of oil tankers waiting in the harbor, just sitting there to be blown up by an army of identical terrorists.
It completely redefines the title, The Stanley Farm. It sounds so pastoral, right? A nice place to buy corn.
Yeah, but it's a play on words. Stanley, as in Standardly, the Standard Farm. A factory for mass-producing identical tragedies.
And the story reaches its climax right there in the park. The jazz music stops, the club doors open, and out come the clones. Two identical young men, two identical young women. They run up to Papa Dick.
And the interaction is just surreal. They immediately start lecturing the narrator on social philosophy, parroting the exact same stability arguments the father just made.
They're already fully indoctrinated by their genetics and their script. They are arrogant, so sure of themselves, and completely unaware of the cliff they're about to walk off.
And the narrator, he tries to scream at them. He tries to break the loop. He grabs the old man and says, "Don't you know what's coming? The suicide, the betrayal. We have to tell them."
But the old man just drags him away.
He protects the experiment over the individuals. He basically says, I can't punish them for crimes they haven't committed yet, even though he knows, for a fact, they will commit them. He chooses the integrity of the standard over the morality of the outcome.
He lets them dance, knowing exactly how the dance ends.
And the story ends with a time jump. The narrator never sees the old man again, but the ending implies that the experiment didn't die with him.
Yeah, this is the Soviet context coming through again. The narrator starts seeing standardization everywhere. He sees a company of soldiers marching, and they all have the same face, a company of dicks. He sees a chorus line of dancers, all identical Archies.
The implication being that the state found the farm.
Precisely. If you are a totalitarian government, the Stanley Farm isn't a horror story. It's a blueprint.
Why deal with dissidents, messy debates, and people who define tree differently when you can populate your army with millions of identical, obedient social atoms?
It changes the theme from, a mad scientist story to one about state control. The narrator suspects the world is slowly being replaced by these standard people.
And it leaves us with a critique of the very idea of stability. I mean, we often say we want everyone to get along, to be on the same page, and Dneprov is saying, be careful what you wish for.
Because if you remove the friction, if you remove the misunderstanding that comes from being different, you don't get paradise. You get a loop.
You get a closed system. And in a closed system, entropy just gets maximized. The perfect society in this story creates a perfect recurrence of suffering. It suggests that our differences, the fact that your tree is different from my tree, is actually the escape hatch.
It's the only thing that allows us to change the future.
Yeah. If everyone is the same, the future is just the past on repeat. And if the past was flawed, which it always is, then the future is going to be a disaster.
Exactly. Innovation, progress, even redemption, they all require deviation. You need someone to look at the script and say, no, I'm not climbing that tree today.
Or no, I'm not going to cheat on my spouse. The clones couldn't do that because they were designed not to.
It really makes you think about the trade-offs we make for comfort. The old man wanted a world where he didn't have to explain himself, where everyone just understood, but the cost of that understanding was the loss of free will.
And notice the irony. The standard he chose was deeply flawed. That's a problem with any form of social engineering or intense conformity, right? Who gets to decide what the standard is?
Right.
If you clone a saint, maybe you get a boring but peaceful world. But humans aren't saints. If you clone a human, you clone capacity for deceit, for violence, for selfishness. You just amplify the human condition. You don't cure it.
It's a compelling argument for chaos. I think after reading this, I'd rather argue with you about the definition of word than be a cog in a suicide machine.
I think that's the healthy takeaway. Friction is proof of life. The noise of disagreement is the sound of freedom.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. We don't have biological cloning factories yet. We don't have Greenball Farm. But we do have algorithms. We have social media bubbles that sort us into these standardized groups where everyone thinks the same, votes the same, and hates the same enemies.
We're essentially building our own digital Stanley farms.
We are voluntarily standardizing our own social atoms. We seek out the people who mirror us because it feels safe, it feels stable. But if you look around your life and everyone agrees with you and everyone looks like you and everyone validates your past, are you in a community?
Or are you just waiting for the script to tell you to find an oak tree?
That is a chilling thought. We might be locking ourselves in the same room as the clones without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about the next time you feel the urge to unfollow someone just because they disagree with you.
Maybe that disagreement is the only thing keeping the tanker from blowing up.
Indeed. Keep the friction alive.
Thanks for diving in with us on the Stanley Farm.
Stay unique.
See you next time.